Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs. The first pig loved to play and have fun. She would spend hours out in the fields making daisy chains and climbing trees. The second pig was very good looking. He liked to go down to the pond and look at his reflection all day. The third pig was extremely clever. He liked to stay in his bedroom reading books and doing sums. But sometimes the little pigs would forget to help Mummy and Daddy Pig with the chores, and this made them feel very cross. One day, Mummy Pig said, "I've had enough of you 3 lazy little pigs. This house is a terrible mess, and you 3 don't help at all. In fact, you make it 10 times worse. It's time you grew up and moved out. Then maybe I'll have a chance to make daisy chains down by the pond, and maybe even finish my book." The 3 little pigs were a bit sad that they were being turfed out. But the third very clever little pig said, "If we all have our own houses, no one can make us do any chores." The other little pigs liked this idea, so they packed their bags with everything they would need out in the big wide world. Mummy Pig waved them off with her handkerchief. "Watch out for the big bad wolf," she cried after them. "What did she say?" said the first pig. "Wasn't listening," said the second pig. "Me neither," said the third pig. The 3 little pigs shrugged their shoulders and off they went. After a while, the 3 little pigs walked past a huge meadow full of wild flowers, and the first pig stopped to have a look. She was getting a bit bored of walking and wished she could go and play. Just then, a big red tractor with a trailer full of straw came bumping along down the road behind them. As the tractor came closer, it went over a huge bump and a bale of hay fell off the back. "That'll do," the first pig said, and hugged the other little pigs goodbye. She quickly made a sweet little house out of the straw. It was a bit of a rush job, and it wasn't very sturdy or strong, but it was cosy enough, and the first pig spent the rest of the day picking flowers and playing in the meadow. The second pig and third pig carried on down the road, and after a while they walked past a big, wide, lazy river and stopped for a drink. The second pig wished he could stay longer, and, as luck would have it, another big red tractor came bumping down the road, this time with a trailer full of sticks. As the tractor came closer, it went over a huge bump and a bundle of sticks fell off the back. "That'll do," the second pig said, and hugged the third pig goodbye. The second pig spent a little longer making his house, but only because he wanted it to be beautiful, not to make it sturdy or strong. When his house was finished, it looked absolutely lovely, with not a stick out of place. He spent the rest of the afternoon next to the river, admiring his gorgeous reflection. The third pig carried on down the road until he came to a lovely spot near to town, just a short walk from the library. He looked up and down the road, wishing for a tractor that something might fall off the back of. Soon enough, a tractor did come along, and wouldn't you know it, it went over a big bump and a lovely big pallet of bricks fell off the back. "That'll do," said the third pig, and got to work making his house. Now, the third pig was a bit of a smarty pants and decided to make the strongest, sturdiest house he could. He took all night building the house, and it had a smart front door and a nice big fireplace and a handsome chimney on the top. When he was finished, he closed the door and locked it behind him and sat down to do some sums. The 3 little pigs loved their houses, and they all lived happily ever after. Well, that's not quite true, because the big bad wolf had picked up the 3 little pigs' delicious scent and found himself outside the first pig's straw house in no time at all. The big bad wolf was an expert at eating piggies, and he knew just what to do. Little pig, let me come in." "Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin, I will not let you in," replied the first pig. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," howled the big bad wolf. He took an enormous deep breath and, before he could blow it down, a gentle breeze came along and scattered the straw house in the wind, leaving the poor little pig trembling where it once stood. The big bad wolf put the first pig in his sack for later. The big bad wolf carried on down the road, following the yummy scent of the second pig. Soon enough, he came across the stick house. Little pig, let me come in." "Not by the hairs of my chinny chin chin, I will not let you in," replied the second pig. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," howled the big bad wolf. He took an enormous deep breath and blew as hard as he could. The stick house wibbled and wobbled and swayed, and before long came crashing to the ground, leaving the poor little pig trembling where it once stood. The big bad wolf put the second pig in his sack for later. The big bad wolf carried on down the road, following the scrumptious scent of the third pig. Soon enough, he came across the brick house. Little pig, let me come in." "Not by the hairs on my chinny chin chin, I will not let you in," replied the third pig. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," howled the big bad wolf. He took an enormous deep breath and blew as hard as he could, but nothing happened. He took an even bigger, deeper breath and blew the hardest he had ever blown. The house didn't even quiver. The big bad wolf wasn't very happy about this. He was supposed to be an expert at eating piggies. It would be really embarrassing if this little piggy got away. He tied the sack full of the first and second pigs to a tree and looked all around the house for a way in. Spying the chimney, he climbed the drain pipe and crossed the roof. It was a bit of a tight squeeze and it was quite warm, but it would be worth it, he told himself. The big bad wolf sat on the edge of the chimney and jumped. The wolf fell down, down, down the chimney, right into the fireplace below. He jumped up, howling, and found that the very end of his long tail was on fire. The wolf ran out of the door and back down the road, and he never tried to eat another pig as long as he lived. The three little pigs all laughed and danced and hugged all night. From then on, they all lived in the strong, sturdy brick house and worked together to keep it clean and tidy. The very clever third pig used his great big brain to help them use their time wisely. The very beautiful second pig showed them how to make the house look beautiful. And the very playful first pig showed them how to have fun while they worked. And they really did all live happily ever after. Once upon a time, at the edge of a quiet forest, there lived a boy named Peter. Peter wasn't one for sitting around. Oh no, he was always off on some adventure, climbing trees, chasing butterflies, or seeing how far he could skip a stone across the pond. Peter lived with his grandpa, a grumpy sort of fellow, but mostly just loved Peter to bits. Grandpa was always reminding him, "Don't go wandering out beyond the garden gate. It's dangerous out there." He'd wag his finger and talk about the wolf that prowled in the forest. Peter didn't really believe in this wolf. He'd never seen it, not even a paw print. Probably just a big dog, he thought, shrugging. But he did dream of the wolf. He would dream about it sneaking in through his window or waiting for him on his way to school. He had to know for sure if the wolf was real. So one sunny morning, when Peter saw the garden gate was slightly open, he thought, what could go wrong? And slipped outside. Peter hadn't gone far when he bumped into a little robin, fluttering from branch to branch.
"Tweet, tweet! What's up, Peter?"
chirped the robin. "Oh, you know, just exploring," Peter said casually, as though he didn't have strict instructions to stay inside. The robin tilted its head.
"You're pretty brave. What about the wolf?"
Peter snorted. "There's no wolf."
"Suit yourself,"
said the robin, hopping from tree to tree beside him. Just then, a duck waddled up, quacking loudly. "Peter, what are you doing outside the garden?" the duck demanded. "Same as you," Peter said, hands on his hips. "Well, I'm out here because the pond inside is boring," huffed the duck.
"It's a shame you can't just fly away like me,"
the robin taunted.
"It must be such a sad little life, just bobbing around in that muddy little pond."
The duck quacked indignantly at the robin and flapped his wings crossly, and before you knew it, the robin and the duck were arguing. Peter rolled his eyes. All right, calm down, you two." As the robin and the duck squabbled, Peter heard a soft meow. "Trouble brewing, Peter?" purred a sleek black cat slinking towards them. "Nah, just these two bird brains," Peter replied. The cat's eyes gleamed. "That little robin looks tasty. Don't even think about it, warned Peter. The robin fluffed up his feathers, offended.
Excuse me? You choke on me, furball.
Before the cat could pounce, Peter raised his voice. Enough! Let's all just... But then, a deep, low growl rolled through the trees like thunder. Peter froze. The robin froze. The duck froze mid-quack. Even the cat, who was usually too cool to care, froze. Out from the shadows with golden eyes that gleamed like fire, stepped the wolf. Whoa, whispered Peter. Okay, so Grandpa really wasn't kidding. The wolf licked its lips, his eyes flicking from one delicious morsel to the next. The robin, the duck, the cat and Peter didn't waste another second. They each turned and fled. The duck flapped and waddled as fast as it could toward the pond. The robin zipped up to a high branch. The cat bolted to the nearest tree and scrambled up like its life depended on it, which it definitely did. But Peter, he grabbed a thick branch and stood his ground. "You're not getting past me," he said, though his heart was pounding like a drum. The wolf lunged, snapping its jaws, but Peter was quick. He dodged left, then right, swinging his branch like a knight with a sword.
Over here!
Shouted the robin, flapping and diving at the wolf's head to distract it. Peter spotted a rope hanging from a tree. An idea struck him like lightning. He grabbed the rope, climbed the tree faster than he thought possible, and tied a loop. "Hey, big bad wolf!" Peter shouted. The wolf snarled and leapt towards him, but Peter dropped the loop right over its head and shoulders. With a mighty tug, he pulled the rope tight around the wolf's middle. The wolf thrashed and growled, but it was stuck, swinging upside down from the tree branch. Just then, Peter heard a familiar voice shouting, "Peter, where are you?" It was Grandpa, running towards him with a group of hunters. They stopped short, staring in amazement at the sight of Peter holding the rope, and the wolf tied up like a big furry package. "You caught it?" one hunter asked, jaw dropped. Peter grinned. "Well, I had some help," he said, nodding to the robin, duck and cat, who all looked pretty pleased with themselves. Grandpa sighed, shaking his head. "Peter, you're grounded for a week." Peter frowned. And, Grandpa added with a wink, "you're the bravest kid I know." The hunters carefully tied the wolf up and were about to take it away when the wolf looked up at Peter, fear and desperation in his yellow eyes. "Wait," Peter said. "What are you going to do with him?" The hunters looked grave. One of them knelt down before Peter and put his hand on his shoulder. "This wolf won't be a danger to you anymore, young man." "You're not going to hurt him, are you?" Peter asked, his eyes wide with shock. The hunter shifted from one foot to the other and couldn't seem to meet Peter's eye. "There must be another way," Peter said. He thought, and just as before, an idea hit him like lightning. "What about the zoo?" he said suddenly. "They have lovely big enclosures and lots of other wolves, and he would be comfortable and well fed, and we would be safe from him, and he would be safe from us. Could that work?" The hunters smiled and said, "Yes, Peter, that would work." The wolf looked at Peter again, and he swore he could see the relief and gratitude in the wolf's eyes. Peter stepped towards the wolf, dodging Grandpa's hand that tried to pull him back, and he reached out to stroke the wolf's soft fur. The wolf stayed perfectly still. "Okay," Peter said gently, turning to the hunters. "You can take him." So the hunters took the wolf away, and Peter returned to the garden, where Grandpa made a big pot of soup to celebrate. The robin stayed to share the crumbs, and the duck quacked about its narrow escape, and the cat curled up by the fire like nothing had happened. But Peter still dreamed of the wolf every night, wondering if he had made the right decision, hoping that he really was having a good life in the zoo. A year later, Peter and his grandfather visited the zoo together. They rushed past the naughty monkeys, the towering giraffes and the ferocious tigers, until they reached the wolf enclosure. They watched and waited, and finally they saw the wolf from the forest step out tentatively from his den, followed by a slightly smaller wolf. The smaller one nuzzled his neck and then turned her head to look back into the den. and 3 fluffy little cubs tumbled and rolled out one by one. They jumped and pawed at the wolf, tugging his ears and licking his face. Peter and his grandfather laughed, and the wolf looked up at Peter, recognition shining in his eyes. He stared for a long time and then dipped his chin at Peter, who nodded back. That night, Peter dreamed of the wolf. He dreamed of riding on the wolf's back, his hands dug deep into the wolf's fur, holding tight, racing through the forest, the wind whipping his face. After that, he never dreamed of the wolf again, because he knew for a fact that he had done the right thing. And so, Peter and the wolf lived happily ever after. Once upon a time, quite close to here actually, there was a wild and wonderful forest. The forest was full of friendly folk, but there were also some scary parts of the forest, with ferocious and sneaky beasts. One of these creatures was a wolf. He was big and he was bad, and he was always trying to gobble up the friendly folk. The friendly folk knew this, and they told stories to their children about the big bad wolf, about how he would try to trick them, how he was clever and ruthless, and he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Over the years, the friendly folk became wise to the wolf's sneaky tricks, and they weren't so easy for the wolf to trick anymore. And so the wolf went away to try to find a village full of people who weren't so clever. This made the friendly folk very happy, as the danger that prowled just beyond the tree line was no longer there. Slowly, the grown-ups started to let the children play deeper into the woods, or skip along the banks of the stream, or walk to the older cottages in the centre of the forest to deliver bread or letters. Anyway, back to Little Red Riding Hood. Remember her? One day, she was called into the kitchen by her mother. "Your grandmother isn't feeling well," she said. "I've baked a pie for her. Will you take it to Granny's cottage to cheer her up?" Red loved her granny, and she was so excited to go and see her that she did a little dance before rushing out of the door so fast she almost forgot the basket. Her mother gave her a big hug and said, "Watch out for the big bad wolf," and they both laughed, as this wasn't really a warning anymore, not like it used to be. It was just something people said. As Little Red Riding Hood skipped along the path, she admired the blossoms and whistled back to the songbirds singing in the trees. She loved the forest in spring. The smell of the wild garlic, the tap-tap-tapping of the woodpeckers. She felt the woods come alive around her, and she felt more at home than she did by the fire in her own little cottage. Quite suddenly, Red noticed that the birds had stopped singing. The air had a chill in it, and the blossoms even seemed to curl in on themselves, away from whatever threat was in the air. Red stopped and looked around, holding on more tightly to her basket. Suddenly, a deep voice spoke. "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood." Startled, she turned around and saw him. He was huge and grey, and he was standing up on his hind legs, so he was much taller than a man. He had sharp teeth and a cunning smile. "Good morning," she replied politely, though she could feel her heart hammering against her chest. "And where are you going on this fine day?" asked the wolf, leaning forward and showing her his toothy grin. "I'm going to Granny's cottage," Little Red Riding Hood said. "My grandmother isn't feeling well, and I'm bringing her a pie." The wolf's eyes gleamed and his mouth watered. "How kind of you," he said. "Do you know, there's a lovely patch of bluebells just over that ridge. I'm sure it would cheer her to have a bunch by her bed." What a kindly wolf, Red thought. Perhaps those silly children's tales are just a load of old rubbish. Red smiled and waved at the wolf as she set off to find the bluebells. The wolf chuckled to himself as he slunk on down the path towards Granny's cottage. Before long, Red was at the door of Granny's cottage with the basket in one hand and a generous bouquet of bluebells in the other. She tapped gently at the door, and a strangely quiet voice said, "Come in, dear." Red let herself in and looked around. It was dark and dingy, and there was a peculiar chill inside the cottage. She could see her grandmother in bed in the corner. She had the covers pulled right up to her chin, and there was something strange about her face. "Come closer, dear. Come and sit by me," she called. Red thought to herself, "Oh dear, Grandmother must be worse than I thought. She never has all of the curtains closed, and she always has a fire crackling away in the hearth." Little Red Riding Hood had always been a practical sort of girl, so she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. "Don't worry about me, Granny," she called into the dark. "I'll get this place shipshape in no time." Red poured some water into a jug for the bluebells and set to sweeping the floor and starting the fire. She started to open the curtains when she heard a funny, muffled sort of sound coming from a broom cupboard. Red stopped and looked around, but Granny started coughing and said, "Come closer, dear. I'd like to look at you. It's been so long since you visited." Well, that was definitely strange. Red and the other children came to Granny's cottage to bake cookies and hear Granny's stories twice a week. Had the old woman bumped her head? Red brought the jug of bluebells over to the bed, thinking they would brighten her Granny's mood. As she got closer, she couldn't believe what strange effects this illness had had on the woman in the bed. "Oh, Grandmother," Red said, "what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with, my dear," the figure in the bed replied. "And Grandmother, what big eyes you have," said Red. "All the better to see you with, my dear," the strange creature said. "And Grandmother, what big teeth you have," cried Red. "All the better to eat you with," roared the wolf, throwing off the covers and going to leap from the bed. Little Red Riding Hood was so shocked she didn't have a second to make a plan. She just used what she had in her hands. Quick as a flash, she lifted the bluebell jug in the air and smashed it down on the wolf's head, sending a spray of water, sharp shards of pottery, and 100 bluebells showering all over the place. The wolf was out cold on the floor. Just then, Red's real Granny came bursting from the broom cupboard in her nightie. Red and Granny hugged and then got to work tidying up the mess. They tied up the wolf and carried him down to the river, where they put him in Granny's old rowing boat and floated him away. The wolf was never seen again. Later, while Red and Granny finished the pie, they decided that seeing as the wolf problem was solved, there was no good reason to worry the other grown-ups in the forest. After all, they would never allow the children to play amongst the trees, skip along the stream, or walk to cottages deep in the forest anymore if they found out. It would stay their secret. Once upon a time, there was a mother goat, and she had 7 little kids. She loved them all very much, and she worked hard to keep them all happy and healthy. Not so very far away, there was a big, bad wolf. He worked very hard to keep only himself happy and healthy. He didn't much care about anyone else. One day, the mother goat needed to go to the market to get some delicious dinner for her kids. As she left the house, she told her little baby kids to lock the door behind her and not to open it for anyone. Don't open the door for anyone, especially the big bad wolf. He might try to trick you, but remember, his voice is rough and gruff and grumpy sounding, and his paws are grey. If you remember those things, he won't be able to trick you. She kissed them all goodbye, and off she went to the market. Before long, the wolf came along, just as the mother goat had predicted. He knocked on the door and said, "Little goats, it's me, your mother. Do let me in. I've brought treats for you from the market." The little goats listened carefully and heard the rough, gruff, grumpy sound of the wolf's voice. "Go away," they shouted. "We know you're the wolf. Your voice is rough and gruff and grumpy, and our mother's voice is lovely and nice. You can't fool us." Quite annoyed, the wolf stomped off, back into the woods he came from. A bee buzzed around his head and he had an idea. He found the bee's nest and carefully took a little bit of honey, which he ate up in one big lick. When the honey reached his throat, it soothed it and made his voice sound all smooth and lovely and nice. He grinned wickedly. Off he went back to the little goat's house and knocked on the door again. "Little goats, it's really me this time, your mother, back from the market with treats for all of you. Do let me in."
Oh.
The little goats all looked at each other. It really did sound a lot like their mother. But the littlest goat peeked through the letterbox and saw the wolf's grey paws. "You're not our mother," he cried. "Your paws are grey and our mother has white hooves. Go away, you can't fool us." Even more annoyed, the wolf skulked off, back into the woods he came from. As he walked, he got tangled up in a spider's web, the sticky silk covering his face. "Ugh!" he cried. But then he had an idea. He took the pale, silvery white spider silk and wrapped it round and round his hands, smoothing it and shaping it as he did so that after a while his paws looked just like little white hooves. Off he went, back to the little goat's house, and knocked on the door once more. "Little goats, here I actually am this time, your dear mother, back from the market with treats for all of you. Listen to my lovely and nice voice and look at my cute little white hooves." He dangled them daintily by the letterbox for the little kids to have a look. "Please let me in." The little kids looked at each other again and they all nodded in agreement. Nothing to worry about here. They happily unlocked the door and threw it wide open to greet their mother and eat their delicious treats. The wolf jumped through the door and said, "Ha ha, it's me, the wolf, you silly little goats. It was me all along. I fooled you." He chased them all around the house and they tried to run away and hide. 3 goats hid under the bed. He found them. 2 goats hid behind the sofa. He found them. 1 goat hid under the doormat. He found him rather easily. The wolf threw them all in his sack to take home for his dinner. But after the busy morning he had had, traipsing back and forth to the woods and then chasing those pesky little kids all around the house, the wolf felt rather tired. He spotted a nice little patch of soft grass under a shady tree just by the riverbank, and he thought, "I'll just have a little nap, and then I'll head on home with my sack of goats and eat them for my tea." Feeling very smug, the wolf set down the sack and went to sleep. But there was something the wolf hadn't realised, something that he had missed. And if he had listened properly at wolf school in his maths lessons, it would not have been so easily overlooked. Earlier on, when he was chasing the little kids, trying to find them all in their hiding places, there were 7 little goats. But in his sack, well, let's see, 3 goats under the bed, 2 goats behind the sofa, 1 goat under the doormat. That's only 6 little goats in the sack. 1 little goat was missing. Meanwhile, back at the goat's house, the real and very lovely mother goat returned from the market. She opened the front door and gasped at what she saw. The house was in utter disarray. The chairs had been knocked over, the curtains had been pulled off their hooks, and her lovely little baby goats were all gone. "Where are you, my little kids?" she called out, panic-stricken. Then a little muffled voice said, "I'm here, Mother." She followed the sound of the voice to the grandfather clock and opened the little door wide. Her littlest baby goat was squashed inside. After she had pulled him out and he had told her exactly what had happened, the lovely mother goat put her serious face on. She didn't use it very often, usually if they wouldn't tidy their toys or if one of them pinched a brother or sister goat. But when she did, her baby goats knew she meant business. She took the littlest goat by the hand and marched off towards the woods, determined to give that naughty wolf a very severe talking to. They found the wolf still snoring under the tree, the sack of goats still wriggling and jiggling beside him. Mother Goat had an idea. She carefully opened the sack and, encouraging the little kids to be as quiet as possible, she freed them. She hugged and kissed all 6 of the little rescued goats, and then she got to work. She collected up 6 of the biggest rocks she could find and placed them in the sack, tying it up again just as she had found it. She and her 7 little kids watched, hidden behind a big boulder, as the wolf stirred and woke from his nap. He licked his lips and rubbed his greedy paws together as he went to lift the sack onto his back. But the sack was so much heavier than before, and the wolf wasn't expecting it, and the weight of it, as he swung it over his shoulder, made him stumble backwards, right into the river. Splash! The little goats and their mother goat laughed and laughed, and then they skipped back to their little house. After a bit of tidying up, they sat around their table enjoying the treats their lovely mother had brought from the market. And they all lived very, very happily ever after. Once upon a time, not very far away from your town, in a cosy brick house, there lived 3 little pigs. They felt safe and happy in their sturdy home, especially as they knew they had seen off the big bad wolf, and he would bother them no longer. And with Christmas just around the corner, they were bustling with excitement as they readied themselves and their home to celebrate their favourite time of the year together. Each little pig had their own special job to prepare for the festivities. The first pig, who loved to play and have fun, made the games and activities they would play on the big day: Pin the Tail on the Wolf, Dizzy Piggy, and Woodland Whispers. The second pig, who liked to make things beautiful, decorated the house with holly and ivy, twinkling lights, paper snowflakes, and a huge Christmas tree overflowing with tinkling bells, shiny baubles, and sparkling tinsel. The third pig, who was very clever, was in charge of the food. Making a festive feast is pretty tricky, and it takes a lot of concentrating and skill, so he was the perfect pig for the job. He made buttery roasted parsnips and creamy cauliflower cheese, sweet nutty stuffing and crisp roast potatoes. And for pudding, he made a sumptuous cherry pie and custard. Everything looked delicious. But as they were busy with their preparations, the pigs couldn't help but feel that something was missing. Just as they were pondering this, there was a loud knock on the door. The pigs jumped and looked at each other, unsure who would be visiting them on Christmas Day. The first pig peered through the window and gasped. "It's a fox!" he squeaked, trembling a little. The other pigs exchanged worried glances. The fox stood on the doorstep, shivering and cold, looking hungry and lonely, and the pigs straight away felt sorry for him. After all, it was Christmas, a time of year to be open and generous, and they were sure the fox felt the same, so they opened the door. Come in, the pigs cried. Inside, the fox was ushered over to the fire and given a cup of hot cocoa and a blanket. They bustled around him, trying to help him feel warm and comfortable and involving him in their Christmas traditions. As the fox warmed up, he became quite chatty, and the pigs were pleased to see that he wanted to get involved in the preparations. He tried to help the first pig with getting the games ready, but he found it quite tricky to understand all the rules, and he kept saying things like, "These games don't look very fun. Can't we play Chase the Chase the Mouse?" It was a bit annoying, as the first pig had spent so much time preparing, so he suggested that the fox help with the decorating. The fox tried helping the second pig to hang a string of lights over the fireplace, but he kept getting tangled up. He said, "All these decorations are a bit over the top, aren't they? We usually just go out hunting, go for a lovely walk and then come home for supper." This sort of comment wasn't really that helpful, so the second pig suggested that the fox help in the kitchen. The fox tried to help the third pig with buttering the parsnips, but he kept doing it a bit too roughly, and the parsnips were turning to mush. "Is this all we're having?" the fox said, wrinkling up his nose. "Well, what do you usually have?" the third pig inquired, a little irritated. The fox thought for a moment. "Sometimes we have rabbit," he said, putting the butter knife down on the table. "Sometimes we have pheasant," he said, wiping his fingers clean. "But our favourite thing to have for Christmas dinner," he said as he licked his lips, "is pig." He leapt over the table towards the pigs, and they squealed and ran through the front door and out into the snowy night. The woods were empty. All the other creatures were at home celebrating with their families, so there was no one there to help as the pigs ran through the night, the fox snapping at their heels. Suddenly, there wasn't just one fox, not two, but a whole family of foxes chasing the pigs. This had been their plan from the start. The pigs ran and ran, jumping over fallen logs and scraping through brambles, and they were starting to get tired, starting to slow down. Suddenly, they heard a howl, and then, there in front of them was the big, bad wolf, snarling and snapping his jaws. The pigs were terrified, but not as terrified as the foxes. They were enemies of the wolf and had been for generations. The foxes turned tail and scampered back into the woods, whimpering. The pigs were frozen in place, trembling at the new danger before them. But the wolf stopped snarling, sat down, and smiled nervously at them. "Hello, pigs," he said gently. The pigs said nothing. They had been fooled already tonight, and they wouldn't allow it to happen again. "I understand that it might be hard to trust me after everything that happened," the wolf said. "You know, all that huffing and puffing business." He looked a little embarrassed. "Well, I mean to make amends. I was actually on my way to your very nice house now to give you these." He held open his sack, and inside were delicately wrapped Christmas presents addressed to the pigs. "For us?" the pigs said. "For you," the wolf confirmed. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I regret how I treated you all. It's no wonder I've never really had any friends when that's how I used to behave. And, well, Christmas is just such a terrible time to be lonely." He offered them a small, hopeful smile. The pigs looked at each other.
What?
They finally realised what was missing from their Christmas. They had been having such a wonderful time together, but deep down, they knew that the wolf was out in the woods, cold and alone, and they simply couldn't enjoy Christmas because of it. "Come on," the pigs said. "You better come home with us." "Really?" the wolf said, his ears pricking up in surprise. "After everything?" "Yep," the pig said. "After all, Christmas is a time for eating, drinking, games, presents and fun. But it's also a time for kindness, for generosity and for forgiveness. So that's what we'll do. Let's go." The wolf followed them home through the woods, chatting and laughing all the way. As they entered the cosy little brick house, he was instantly warmed by the fire. But he also felt warm in his heart too, because he knew he had 3 new friends and his old life was far behind him. He gave the pigs their presents: a banjo for the pig who loved to play and have fun, brightly coloured paints for the pig who loved beautiful things, and a library card for the clever pig so he could read all the books he wanted and would never have to stop learning. The pigs were delighted. The wolf enjoyed the delicious supper and all the games, and the pigs decided that as their special guest, and because he was the tallest, he could put the star at the top of the tree. At the end of the evening, they all hugged the wolf, and he thanked them for their kindness. They invited him back the next year and all the years after that, and he gratefully accepted, knowing that they would now be lifelong friends. Once upon a time, there was a tiny village surrounded by a thick, enchanted forest. And in that forest lived the big, bad wolf. Everyone in the village and the forest knew the stories about him, how he blew down houses, chased children, and caused general mischief wherever he went. But lately, the big bad wolf had been keeping to himself. He no longer terrorised the village, nor did he stalk the forest paths. He had become lonely, forgotten, and bitter. It was Christmas Eve, and the entire village was buzzing with excitement. The villagers were placing shiny baubles on their trees, hanging twinkling lights, and preparing grand feasts to share with their friends and families. Laughter and cheer echoed through the streets. But high on a hill, in a dark and cold den, the big bad wolf sat alone, far away from the warmth and joy of the village. The wolf watched from his den as the twinkling lights of the village flickered in the distance. He grumbled to himself, "Christmas, bah! What's so special about it? A bunch of silly decorations and pointless gift-giving." He huffed and turned back to the dark corner of his den. His grumpy mood was made worse by a bothersome and irritating feeling of, well, he wasn't sure what. Lately, he'd noticed that the spirit of Christmas, the joy, the cheer, the magic, seemed to be fading. The forest was quieter, the laughter not as bright, and even the snow seemed less sparkling. Not that he cared, but he wondered what had caused it all. As the night grew darker and the villagers started to head to their beds, the big bad wolf was startled by a loud thud outside his den. He pricked his ears and cautiously moved towards the entrance. To his surprise, lying in the snow outside his den was a large, shimmering sack. It sparkled with a soft glow and seemed to warm the air around it. "What now?" he muttered, his nose twitching as he inspected the sack. The wolf gingerly opened the top, peering inside. To his shock, the sack was filled with swirling and glittering magic, and as he stared at it, he felt overcome with joy and awe at the magic of Christmas. The wolf snapped the sack closed again, looking at the tag on it. "To the village, your Christmas spirit, love from Santa Claus." The wolf's eyes widened. "Santa Claus?" he gasped. "This is his sack of Christmas spirit. How did it end up here?" The wolf thought hard about what to do with the sack. What if he just kept it? Finally, he shook his head. "I can't keep this," he muttered. "Christmas may not be for me, but it's important to everyone else." Determined to do the right thing, the wolf knew he had to return the sack to the village before Christmas morning. But how? He couldn't just walk into the village without causing a panic. No one trusted him, and they surely wouldn't believe he was bringing Christmas spirit back instead of taking it away. As he thought about what to do, the wolf's sharp ears picked up the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow. He looked up to see a young boy from the village wandering towards his den. The boy was shivering, his red coat flapping in the cold wind, and he looked lost. "Hey!" the wolf called out before he could stop himself. "What are you doing out here, kid?" The boy froze, wide-eyed and terrified. The big bad wolf?" he stammered. I didn't mean to." The wolf sighed, trying not to scare the boy any further. "Relax, kid, I'm not going to hurt you. What are you doing so far from the village on Christmas Eve?" I got lost," the boy admitted, his teeth chattering from the cold. "I went into the forest to find a perfect Christmas tree for my family, but then it got dark, and now I can't find my way home." The wolf tilted his head. "Well, you're lucky you didn't get caught by something worse than me. The forest can be dangerous at night." The boy moved quickly to stand closer to the wolf, no longer afraid of him. He looked up at the wolf's large, looming figure and smiled nervously, and then glanced at the shimmering sack behind him. "What's that?" The wolf hesitated, but then decided to tell the truth. "This is Santa's bag of Christmas spirit. It fell near my den, and now I need to return it to the village before Christmas morning, or no one will have a happy Christmas." The boy's eyes lit up. "Santa's bag? Why, this is incredible! But how will you get into the village?" "I was hoping you might help me," with a wry smile. "I can get you back through the forest, and if you can guide me through the village without causing a fuss, we can get the Christmas spirit back where it belongs." The boy thought for a moment, then held out his hand. The wolf looked at it cautiously, and then reached out his paw, and they shook on it. The wolf picked up the magical sack and tossed it over his shoulder. Together, the boy and the wolf carefully made their way through the forest and toward the village. As they approached the edge of the village, the boy turned to the wolf. "We'll go through the back streets and into the square where the big tree is," the boy whispered. "That's where Santa always leaves the Christmas spirit for everyone to share." The wolf nodded, following the boy's lead as they crept through the snowy streets, dodging windows and avoiding the villagers. Soon they reached the village square, where a giant Christmas tree stood proudly in the middle. It sparkled with lights, but something about it seemed dimmer than usual. Without the Christmas spirit, the tree couldn't shine the way it was meant to. The wolf gently placed the sack beneath the tree, and as soon as he did, the tree glowed brighter and the air around them filled with the sweet scent of pine and cinnamon, and the entire village seemed to hum with warmth and joy. The Christmas spirit had returned. The boy looked at the wolf in awe. "You did it! You brought Christmas back!" The wolf smiled, a real genuine smile, and felt something warm in his chest. "I suppose I did," he said quietly. Just then, a soft jingle filled the air and a familiar voice boomed from above.
"Ho, ho, ho! What do we have here?"
The wolf and the boy looked up to see Santa Claus landing his sleigh in the square. Santa hopped out and walked over to them with a twinkle in his eye. "Ah, my sack! I wondered where it had gone," Santa said, patting the wolf on the back. "Thank you, Wolf. You've saved Christmas for everyone." The wolf blushed, not used to praise. It was the right thing to do. Santa smiled warmly. "Indeed it was. You've shown that even the big bad wolf can have a heart full of Christmas spirit." The boy grinned and tugged at the wolf's paw. "See? You're not so bad after all." With a jolly laugh, Santa handed the wolf a small wrapped gift. "For you, my friend. Merry Christmas." The wolf unwrapped the gift to find a beautifully crafted ornament, a shining star to place on the village Christmas tree. For the first time in his life, the big bad wolf felt a sense of belonging, and not only that, but the true joy of Christmas. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a young boy who spent all of his days sitting high up on a hill under a maple tree. He had just one job: to watch over the sheep from the big bad wolf. The wolf too had just one job: to hunt down sheep to satisfy his hunger. The boy often found himself bored. Guarding the sheep day in, day out left him wishing for a different job, or perhaps some excitement. More than anything, he hated sitting alone all day, every day. So, one day, he decided to shout, "Help! Help! A wolf is chasing the sheep, and they're all running away!" The villagers heard the boy's cries, and they all dropped what they were doing and quickly rushed to help. But when they reached the top of the hill, there was no wolf, just the boy and the sheep, peacefully resting in the greenest grass you could imagine. "Where is the wolf?" the villagers asked. "There is no wolf," the boy said, unable to stop himself from laughing. The villagers were upset. They were exhausted from running and frustrated about their interrupted work. One of the men turned around and shouted at the boy, "Don't cry wolf when there is no wolf around. Only call for help when you truly need it." The boy found all of this very amusing. He was quite the little prankster and enjoyed seeing people rush up the hill for no reason. So, the next day, the boy walked up the hill with his flock. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled again. "Help! Wolf! Help me! He's going to eat all the sheep in my flock!" Once more, the villagers dropped what they were doing and ran up the hill. And once again, there was no wolf. "Where is the wolf?" the villagers asked. "There is no wolf," the boy replied, and once again he couldn't help but laugh. Again, a man turned and firmly said, "Don't cry wolf when there isn't one around. Only call for help when you truly need it." The next morning, the boy went up the hill with his flock again. And wouldn't you know it, this time, he actually saw a real wolf hiding in the nearby forest. At first, the boy didn't know what to do, but then he started yelling, "Help! Wolf! Help!" The people in the village heard his cries, but this time they knew better and didn't come running up the hill. The villagers kept hearing his cries, but didn't move an inch. They wouldn't fall for the same trick again. Now all the sheep ran away and were lost, chased off by the wolf. The boy was very saddened by this and sat down by the tree again. But this time, there was no smile on his face. At the end of the day, the villagers waited as usual for the boy to bring back the flock of sheep. But that evening, the boy didn't return. They decided to go and see what was wrong. The villagers gathered around the boy. Through his tears, he asked, "Why didn't you come to help me? A big bad wolf chased all the sheep away. I yelled and yelled, but no one came to help." The villagers were angry because their sheep were lost. The man who had always advised the boy to stop yelling as a joke said, "Now you see, no one believes a liar. How are we supposed to know if it was real or if you just did it for your amusement again?" From that day on, the boy always told the truth. Or at least he tried to.